So it's been a while since we've recorded a video, and it's in the middle of summer holidays now, so there's been a lot going on. I've moved my shop in Haugesund, have a new location now, so I've moved down the road in Haraldsgata. So if you haven't seen that yet, get down there and check it out. But yeah, lots been going on, so I haven't made any videos for a while. But I actually did make this video before, and I recorded it. It was an hour long, and it turned out that the microphone wasn't working. So it was really good content that I just thought, can I really be bothered doing it all over again? And I waited another month or so, and then I thought, okay, you know what, it's worth it putting this stuff out there. Recently, my Instagram has been bombarded with a lot of science-based training videos with all these younger people with their chin acne and maybe 19, 20-year-olds who are very science-based, 100% living on science alone, and they have stability as their main thing. Like they discredit any kind of previous training and say it's old hat, it's boring, it's redundant. And the purpose of my videos is not to pick a fight with any particular people, not to pick a fight with any people based on my training or diet ideas. The information I'm providing in this video is my opinion. It's going to be supported by the International Society of Sports Nutrition, which is the almanac that I studied to become to write diets for athletes. So when I got my ISSN qualification, I have quoted this book in quite a lot of my packaging regarding meal prep and keto meal prep. And also just in general, this book is full of lots of clinical studies, and this is going to satisfy, the science-based people, but we can't discredit or discount the 50, 60 plus years of competitive bodybuilding experiences and the anecdotal evidence. Now, I am 100%, I love the science, but you can't focus on just science and completely ignore something so obviously is working. So what I'm going to provide in this video is my opinion on various ways to do diets, and you can take bits and pieces of it and adopt it yourself. I'm not looking to cause a fight. I'm not looking to engage any particular dietitians here in Norway who have it in for me. So look, they can do what they want. Look, I've won international bodybuilding competitions. I've won Miss Australia and IFBB, WFF and NABBA. So look, as far as competitive bodybuilding, I've done it, I've lived it, I've done the comp diets, I've helped people get pro cards, I've helped people win shows, international shows, national shows, both here in Norway and Australia and in South Africa and Asia. So my diet experience, I became a personal trainer in the early 2000s. That's when I became officially accredited as a personal trainer. As a personal trainer, I was then training people in Australia, moved to China, trained people in Shanghai, set up boot camps, first ever boot camp person in Shanghai, ran that for a while, and then moved back to Australia, ran my personal training business there. Well, previously to going to China, I was a personal training instructor at the Australian Institute of Fitness and the Australian Institute of Personal Trainers. And then coming back to Australia, I then opened up my own personal training school, academy, World Gym Personal Training with John Davey, shout out. And that made me really look at the facts, the stats, the nitty gritty of competencies to qualify somebody as a personal trainer. And personal trainers, they are not technically accredited to write a diet. Personal training, and shout out to Damien Hayhow now, personal trainers in Australia are not insured to write a diet. So if I said to my client, I want you to have 100 grams of chicken and a teaspoon of peanut butter, and they have an anaphylactic shock and they die or they get very sick, they can sue me because I'm not insured to actually write that diet. I could give dietary suggestions. I can say, hey, drink more water, eat less sugar, eat less ice cream, but I can't say this much and this much. However, I did then get this book and studied for the exam, and this book is a really great book, because at the end of every chapter, I'll be going into it later, at the end of a chapter there's a quiz on that chapter, and you basically have to know this book inside and out to get your qualification, and that qualified me to write diets for athletes. So an athlete is somebody that takes an inherent risk. So the average person doesn't deadlift. Technically in Australia, deadlifts are considered high risk. So a deadlift and a squat and these really complicated movements that are very, very realistic, they are dangerous. But leg pressing and using a chest press machine, all that sort of stuff is kind of that's pushed. So what my point is here, when it comes to science-based, we have studied a lot of stuff with anatomy and physiology. I was involved in a scientific study a long time ago, and they involved taking a core sample on my quad, actually 5 of them, and it was testing how glycogen stores worked throughout exercise, and the exercise was a spin bike. So I was given a bag of food to eat for the day before, and then I was told to come up to this university, and they were going to do a core sample prior, core sample 15 minutes in, another core sample 15 minutes after that, another core sample at the end of a 45-minute bout, and then I waited an hour, and they came back in and went for the last one. Now, that was very traumatic. I didn't realize core samples was basically a quadricep rupture, but yeah, I did it. Still have the scars to show. So I've been involved in a clinical study testing on glycogen depletion and exercise. However, the bag of food they gave me to eat the day before was so little, I was starving. I ate more that was in that bag. Yeah, I was young, I wasn't adhering to the rules there. My point is, the parameters within that study, I had already broached them by eating outside of what they told me to eat. So my glycogen stores were even maybe more maxed out because I ate more than they were asking me to do it for the study. So clinical studies, you have to take it with a grain of salt. We take it and we say, here's a really good hypothesis. Let's test that. Let's see if that actually works. But getting back to the diet now, let's go back to, in my previous videos, I've talked about the energy systems, ATP. We talked about anaerobic and aerobic, and the macros we have, which are protein, carbs, and fat. So a quick refresher: protein, 4 calories per gram; carbs, 4 calories per gram; fat, 9 calories per gram. So fat has over twice as many calories as carbohydrates. But these kind of work, if we're burning fat, we're not in a carb burning environment. Where if oxygen is present, fat is the main fuel source. So if you think about your day-to-day activity, you spend more of your time being aerobic than anaerobic. So, you go to the gym for an hour and you spend that time being mostly anaerobic. The rest of the day, you're aerobic. So you're going to end up using way more fat during the day than you are carbs. But the diets we're going to write today reflect a general person, and we can get a little bit more specific for the athlete. But knowing these 3 things first is important, because we're going to now structure the percentages. So the simplest kind of diet that I would recommend to somebody, where I start with somebody, and this is what I used to write this when I worked at GNC, I would structure your day like this. Okay, so here is the start, which is breakfast, and here's dinner, and here's lunch, and if you're having a mid-morning snack and mid and afternoon snack, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 meals here. I used to say to people, we're going to keep the protein high. So this is protein. Protein is going to stay high the whole day. Then we're going to have carbohydrates high in the morning, and that's going to come down throughout the day. And we're going to have fat starting off low, because if our carbohydrates are high, we want to keep the fat fairly low, just because we store fat if insulin is high. So if insulin is present, we go into fat storing mode. So if we're going to have high carb, I like to have low fat. So we start off low in the fat, and then we come up. So here, this would be a breakfast of high in carb, high in protein, low in fat. That could be as simple as having oats with some protein powder, or having some fruit and some yogurt. This is high in protein, high in carbs, fairly low in fat. Then lunchtime, here we have high in protein, moderate carbs, and some fat. This is more like your meal of when you're having some sort of, a pasta dish, or it's, what most people consider a dinner meal is lunch, because it's high in carb, moderate fat, and it's high in protein. So that would be, potatoes, chicken breast, rice, and then dinner was high in protein, higher in fat, low in carbs. This is more of a salad. So as most office workers, they tend, like the female office workers, they have a salad for lunch and they have a big dinner. This is kind of just reversing that. So whatever they would have for dinner, they're going to have for lunch, and they swap it around. So this is high protein, high fat, and low carb. So that's salad with some salad dressing, some nuts, some salmon. This is pretty much that. And then anywhere we chuck a meal, you can see what we're going to do. We're going to have a mid-morning snack. This will be high in protein, high in carbs, low in fat. This could be a protein shake with some fruit and maybe just a little bit of nuts. Versus over here we're going to have high protein, and we can have way more nuts, because we're going towards the end of the day. The reason why I've structured it this way, and this is not taking into consideration when the person trains. This is just a very basic diet idea. This is starting off. Carbs are going to come throughout the day and taper off, because we're going to most likely use less carbs by the end of the day. Start of the day, we don't know what activity we're doing. Maybe we're physical, maybe we're not, but we're going to burn those carbs doing whatever it is. We're going to go to the gym, we're going to train, we're going to exercise, we're going to go for a walk. By the end of the day, by the time we go to bed, we don't need a lot of carbs right before bed. We don't need high carbs. We don't need a big carb meal right before we go to bed. We're going to have a carb coma. We might sleep very well, but it's not really needed to have a lot of carbs right before bed. So what I've done here is I've just said protein high all the time. Fat comes up. So this is fat. And this was carbs tapering down. So this is diet idea number one. Really easy to do. Every time we chuck in a meal, we can kind of see what we're doing. Now, just say, for example, this person was training, and they're going to train in the afternoon. The carbs that they've eaten throughout the day, they can still use for that workout. They don't have to have a massive amount of carbs right before they train. These carbs are in their glycogen stores. They're ready to go. They can be used. So we don't have to be so specific. This is kind of tailoring a diet for the average person to make it fit into their lifestyle. So, take a screen grab, have a think about this. This is having even just 3 meals a day. You can see what lunch is like. And some people go, oh, this is great now, but like, I have to have a salad for dinner, but my husband, he wants to have a proper meal. I would normally say to my customers, or the customers at GNC, or my clients, make that salad, and the dinner that he eats, you eat for lunch the next day. So you're just saving that dinner for the next day. And then you eat the salad, and for lunch the day after, you eat what he had for dinner. Now, I haven't gone into blood type here. I haven't said, some people can't have chicken, some people can't have potatoes, some people can't have peanut butter. I'm not worried about that right now. I'm not going to pick that. I'm not going to start that fight. This is just purely based on high carb, moderate carb, high fat, high protein. Let's not get too much into the macros there, but into the types of protein and carb sources. So we've done that. That's option number one. Now, if you've heard of carb cycling, this is the idea of having different days or you're having varied. So what I do with some athletes, if they're really kind of starting to hit a plateau in their diet, we might have a day where they're high carb, and the day when they're low carb, and then high carb, and then low carb, high carb, low carb, and so on. So high carb is a day where you're having carbohydrates maybe every meal, or just like before, the 2 meals, having it high for breakfast, moderate for lunch, and low. Then the next day here is low carb, which means very little carbs, maybe only 1 carb meal. So that varies. You're going to vary. There's going to be a variance between these 2 days. This day was kind of maybe 3 times carb meals. This is 1 time carb meal. Then it'll be 3 times and then 1 times. So this is carb variation. Now, if you want to take that, if like this will work, and this will work for most people. But as things slowly stop working or start to work less, then we extend that out. And then we can go to maybe 2 days low carb and then have a high carb. And then 2 and then a high. So now we've got 2 days like that and then a high. 2 days. And once we give that a go, then we can either go low, 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 even low, and then a high carb day. This would technically be a refeed, not a cheat meal, a refeed, because we're having a surplus huge amount of carbohydrates. The benefit of doing this kind of method is this is kind of like peak week for a competition. When you have so little carbs for those days, you super compensate and your glycogen stores can kind of store more than normal. And this is actually a really cool method. If you have a super high carb day, the next day you will still feel pretty good because you're feeding off the carbs from this day. So this day, you're feeling 10 out of 10. This day you're feeling 9. Here you're starting to feel a little bit, bad. You're probably feeling a 7. Now you're really starting to feel it. You might be feeling a 4 or a 5. This day, you might be feeling like death, 2. Then you come back in and feel like 10 again. This is a really cool way to get your ghrelin leptin levels, because the thing is, if you go low carb for too long, then the leptin will be reduced, and you won't go into you won't have such strong fat burning. So your body produces ghrelin, the ghrelin that makes you hungry, and then leptin is released to make you sated. The ghrelin and leptin, which is kind of what all these what's the Ozempic and stuff, they're all these are the new medicines that kind of play on the ghrelin hormones. If you follow a method like this, by the time you get to this day here, your metabolism or your leptin levels are getting quite low. Your ghrelin leptin levels are getting quite low. They react to carbs. So once you have this day here, your metabolism gets spiked up again, and then this day you're actually cruising along in a really good fat burning high metabolism. I don't want to start any fights here, because the thermogenic effect of food and how much you can vary your metabolism. We know that your metabolism slows when you don't eat enough food, or you eat not enough carbs, or you don't eat carbs at the right times, or you're inactive, or your activity level, not to mention hormones, age. To keep this really simple, if we go high carb, the leptin gets lower throughout the day, progressively through after these days. We need to boost it up again, and then it will trickle down. So it goes like this, a boost, and like that. So this 3 days, 4 days, that's up to you. You might find you have one customer, or you might yourself, that just struggles. By the 3rd day, they're useless, or the 4th day, they're useless. If anyone's ever been on a low carb diet, you know that the first few days, it takes a while to really kind of, you got that brain fog. To get your body working on fat as a fuel source, it takes a while to kick in. So as this starts to deplete, you go into a bit zombie space cadet mode. This gets you back out, and you kind of vary it. The alternative is to be in a keto the whole time. Now, what's a keto breakdown? keto, traditional keto diets, well, that's what 75% of your energy is coming from fat. It's like 15% is coming from protein, and then only really 5% is coming from carbs. 75, but 15. Now, if we refer to my book here, and I have the macro requirements section, I've bookmarked a few things here. Now, if we were to look at, say, for example, a bodybuilder, the bodybuilder, it says here their macros. Let's look at some interesting macros here. Okay, because I've got all sorts of athletes here. So we can start with, let's start with a football player. Okay, this is more relatable. Football player. His macro breakdown is 40, and that's carbs. Then we have 30 protein and 30 fat. That's probably one that you've seen quite a lot. Then you've got a bodybuilder, which is 45, 30, and 25. What if we talk about someone who's a track and field athlete? 63, 15, 22. Think about that now. Here is somebody that's, this is a track, so someone who does sprinting or, basically very aerobic, anaerobic. 63% of the calories are coming from carbs. Now, that's the opposite of what we were just talking about, having low carb days. So a track and field athlete can't really perform well on a keto diet. So what is your training goal? Are you trying to change your body composition? Are you trying to grow muscle? If you're going to try to grow muscle, you have to realize you spend most of your time doing that by lifting weights, which is anaerobic, which is carb based. So they have said 45% of your calories should come from carbs, 30, 25. Now, what I've seen is people saying 60% from protein, and then they'll do 30. I am right here. 10, yeah. So protein, super high, carbs, and then fat, like high, super amount of protein. But protein is not going to fuel your workouts. If you understand this, track and field athletes, only 15% of the calories is coming from protein. Is protein so essential? Yes, protein is essential. Let's go into protein requirements. So remember, this is information that's from published and public studies. With the amount of protein given to I'll write these down because this is kind of where it can get a little controversial. And you got people like Milosh Sarkev who goes super high on protein, and then you got your GP, which doesn't really care too much about protein. So your sedentary person, and we know they have 0.8 grams per kilogram. So 0.8 grams per kilogram. That's a sedentary person. What's a sedentary person? Someone that just doesn't do anything, just sits there completely still, doesn't do anything. That's not us. We're athletes. Now, we have the recreational exerciser. That's someone who trains a little bit. The average person, they're not trying to become bodybuilders. They're not trying to win Mr. Olympia. They're not even trying to win a competition. They just want to go to the gym. They're going for a walk, or they're just being a little active. They're taking the dog for a walk. They suggest 1 to 1.4. That's a big difference from this 0.8 to 1.4 here. That's quite significant. That's almost double. Now, if we're going to go to a resistance trainer, somebody who does weights, and they're trying to grow muscle, we then have 1.4 to 1.8. Now, 1.8, you've often heard 2 grams. That's almost 2 grams. It's a lot more than the 0.8. It's an extra gram. So it's double what the doctors will suggest. So when you go back to that keto diet and 75% of your calories is coming from from fat, if we take, for example, take me, I'm 100 kilos, make it simple. If I weigh 100 kilos and I use this formula here, times that by 1.8, I'm supposed to have 180 grams of protein per day. Okay, 180 grams of protein, that is then, and I have 15% of my calories coming from protein in a keto diet, 180 calories. There's no way I can get to 180 on a true keto diet. That's why I make Kilo Meal Prep a breakdown of 55. Was it 50, 45, 5? That's my keto meal prep. Fat, protein, carbs. Most of the calories is coming from fat. Then we got protein. Then we got carbs. So the calories of carbs is quite low. This is like an Atkins diet, but it's a lot more calories from protein than the keto diet, a traditional keto diet, because I'm trying to take into consideration these amounts here, that you have to have a lot more protein than the average. Most people on a keto diet are trying to lose weight. It's very difficult to grow muscle on a keto diet because you are not consuming a lot of carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are what fuels an anaerobic workout. So a keto diet is a really good way to lose weight, but if you're looking to grow muscle, you've got to consider to have a little bit more carbohydrates in your diet than a keto. But a keto, it's nice to do phases of keto, to go on a keto diet for a while, especially if you're going to have some time off the gym. Go on a keto diet, because that will take into consideration that your anaerobic activity has dropped significantly and your aerobic, your fat burning time, has increased because you're not doing much anaerobic stuff. So if you're having some time off the gym, go on a keto diet. I'm not telling you that you should. I'm saying that would be a good time to be on a keto diet. So a sedentary person, 0.8, but Olympia Topman, so these people, these stats are what we talk with Olympia Topman. This is Olympia Topman or the Australian Institute of Sport. They said 1.5 to 1.7, which is very similar to the 1.4 to 1.8. So that's pretty much, that's the Australian Institute of Sport, and this is the ISSN. So it's pretty much accepted. It's going to be around this amount here. So you're shooting for it around, you want to be like at least 1.5. That's kind of your low end. 1.5, 1.5 grams of protein per gram of body weight. Now, to understand how we have something called a BMR. That's your basal metabolic rate. Sorry if it sounds like I'm jumping around a little bit here, because this is my ADHD brain. So you can pause and replay stuff, and feel free to comment in the comment section and ask me to make a follow-up clip or just discuss things in more depth. But I'm trying to now discuss quite a lot of things, and BMR and activity levels. This is quite important. The Harris-Benedict equation. So before we had apps, before we had all these fancy apps and things we could use, we used to plug it in. Oh, I've got so much cool stuff in this book. So if you look here, this equation that you see just here with my pinky is the equation that I used to use to discuss someone, to find someone's BMR, female or male. That's how their basal metabolic rate, how many calories they needed to just survive. Okay, not to do any exercise. So what we did, we found out their BMR, and then we worked out their activity factor. So here you have sedentary, active, vigorous, active. So here we've got 3, but we go into some apps, and I can go into the app that I like to use now. Not an app, actually, I just go to a page. So what have we got here? We got the calorie calculator. This is the one I like to use. So for this one, and this is what I do with all of my clients, all of my athletes, all of my customers. I have to understand their BMR. Now this is very interesting. I'm sweating because it's very hot in here. It's the middle of summer and I have no air conditioning. I'm not stressed out. I'm actually quite relaxed. Now, so for example, let's take the average person. The average person weighs approximately 70 kilos because that's what you see in the elevator. Okay, we're going to keep this in metric, a male. So let's make this person 30 years old. And their height will make them the average height, which is around 175. Now, this is actually, I just said 70 kilos. But let's take, for example, the average person. What kind of body fat percentage do they have? The average person might have a body fat percentage of 15 or 20%. So if I say this person weighs 70 kilos, like that, well, if they're at 70 kilos with a 20% body fat, then 20% of that weight is fat. Now, obviously, we don't want to have no fat. That's unhealthy. 12, 15% is fairly athletic. Under 10 is doable, but some people can really struggle when it gets under 10%. So let's say if somebody was on around 12%, their abs are starting to show at around 10%. So we got someone, their goal is to be around 12%. So of that 70 kilos, let's get rid of at least 6 kilos, okay? So now instead of weighing 70, of their current weight, not the muscle they're going to be putting on, of the current weight. So now we're going to make them 64 kilos because that's how much they would weigh if they didn't have that fat. There's no need to give that person calories for the fat weight they're carrying, okay? Because that fat is just baggage. It's just calories that they're carrying around. So I've got them 30 years old, 175 centimeters, weighing 64 kilos. That's probably their goal weight if they were to stay at that fat mass, but without the fat, at that muscle mass without the fat. So now we've got this person here. Calculate that. It's 1,589. 1,589 calories. That's their BMR. Then we've got these options here. We've got little or no exercise. Exercise 1 to 3 times, exercise 4 to 5, and then we've got intense and very intense with a physical job. So let's take that right in the middle and we'll go daily exercise or intense exercise. So that person, we then do it and we now get these numbers here. So to maintain the weight, they have to be on 2,463 to maintain that weight of 64 kilos. So this is taking into account that they're eating less calories for the body weight that they desire to be. But then they give us these equations here of how much less calories you should eat if you're trying to lose weight. So if we forget about that, we say extreme weight loss is actually 100 calories under their BMR. And that would be extreme. That would be extreme weight loss. In fact, that would be dangerous. So we don't want to do that. And this is where the answer is. It's halfway between here and here. This is what they should be on to not change, and this is what they should be if to be completely still and motionless. So what I like to do, I don't want to go 500 calories under this number here. So right now, look at this one, 1900 calories is pretty much where we want them to be. That's over this, okay? It's excess of their BMR, but it's 500 under what they could be on to stay the same. So this is the diet amount that I would give somebody. So if you were to give yourself a diet, you then say, okay, what's my BMR? You find that out. And now you're going to work out what's your activity level. You times it by that. And then you see 500 below that, that's got 19. Now, with my diets, I give people options. So I don't give them just chicken or just beef. They may want to have salmon for this meal, or they may want to have chicken for that meal. So I know that salmon contains more fat. So I like to give them some variation. So it's 1900 to 2000 calories. And, you know, if they chose chicken meal every meal, then it would be closer to that. But if they had salmon, then don't have salmon every meal. But if they had a couple of salmon meals, it would be closer to this. So I've taken into account food variation, their BMR, and their BMR can't be lower than that. And I've worked out what their weight is minus the body fat, the extra body fat. And then we've worked out the activity factor. So to make it simple there, what I'm saying is you find out what your BMR is based on your desired fat mass, times it by the activity factor, then drop that by around 500 calories. And this 1900 is where this person will be. And now, based on the 1900, is where we break down those macros. So if you remember, so we had 1900 to 2000 calories, and then we had the 40, 30, 30 for a football player. Carbs, we can have 40, 40, 20. If you're really scared about that fat, this still has to stay fairly high. 40, 40, 20. They would like you closer to 50. And my meal prep has actually accounted for that. It's 50, 30, 20. So my meal prep, my product, that is a complete meal in one with carbs, fat, and protein. I've done my macros as such to make this more suitable for the average person. The carbohydrates are highest, the protein is higher than the fat, but as you saw with a track and field athlete, it's extreme reverse of that. That's only 15, half of that. But I just can't I can't bring myself to have so little protein, because that is just not enough to feed the muscles that we are trying to rebuild and break down and rebuild almost daily. So if we have these breakdown, we got 50% of the calories is from carbs. Okay, let's make sure this is right. This is carbs, and this is protein, and this is fat. Now, if you guys remember, this is 4 cals, 9 cals. So this is percentage. So it's not going to be like 50 grams of carbs, 50 grams of 30 grams of protein, and 20 grams of fat, because we know the fat contains twice the calories. So if we have 2 grams of protein, it will be like 1 gram of fat. Even less, it'd be like 0.8, wouldn't it? So if I got a diet of 2000 calories and 50%, so 1000 calories is going to come from carbs. On here, then we're going to have 30% is going to come from protein. So then we're going to have, I'll make sure I get this right. We're going to have, okay, so we'll actually do this together. You can see how on the spot I am here. So it's 1,000 calories of the 2,000 is coming from carbs. So that's 1,000 divided by 4, which means we're going to have 250 grams of carbs in that day. Then we have protein. And if it's going to be 30% coming from of that, that's 600 grams of protein. 600 divided by 4, that's 150 grams of protein. And then fat. Okay, so we know that's 9 calories. So if we have now, that would be 2,400 calories. So it's 400 calories coming from fat. Divide that by 9, and that's only 44 grams of fat. Now we can go more into the breakdown of fats, saturated, polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fats. We go into that another time, but you do need saturated fats, but they recommend around 10% of your fat should be from saturated fats. So most of your fats throughout the day should be good, clean fats. So here we've got 250 grams of carbs, 150 grams of protein. Now, if we go into another table here, the carbohydrate requirement of an endurance athlete is 7 to 12 grams per kilogram per day, and they have 1 gram per kilogram of fat per day. So 44 grams would mean that person weighs 44 kilos. So that's not the ideal amount of fat for an endurance athlete. And as we know, an endurance athlete is doing a lot of aerobic training. So this doesn't fit within the endurance athlete's approach. If I find the page I would like to see, here we have a very interesting table. A bodybuilder is considered 100% anaerobic, 0 aerobic. And we have the total energy intake can vary from 2,000 to 5,000. And his carbohydrate requirement is 33 to 40%, which means he should have 251 grams to 756 grams. It's 2.6 grams per kilo up to 8.3. So here he says the minimum of 241 grams. Here is that. That's 240. Remember, this is 2,000. This is right that's a low end. The bodybuilder, we start at 2,000, go to 5,000. So we're fairly conservative here for a bodybuilder. But this fits within that, because if we also remember, if I've got my 150 here, so if I weigh 100 kilos times 1.5, that is my 150 grams, because it's 1.5 per kilogram. So this is kind of my low end, but that's me on 2,000 calories. Remember, I did that based on me weighing 100 kilos. And remember, this one was based on someone weighing 64 kilos. So we could extrapolate this and do it 100% based on someone weighing 100 kilos, if you'd like. And then we can really get an idea of what we could do for a diet. So let's do that. I wasn't planning on doing that, but since I have everyone's attention, let's do that. Let's go into it. Let's start fresh. And let's write a diet together. diet for somebody looking to weight train, looking to bodybuild, looking to get in shape, the sort of customer I would have in my shop. Okay, let's do this actually. Let's really do this for me. I am 47. Yes, I know. I don't look it. I'm 47 years old. I am 179 centimeters tall, and I do weigh 100 kilos, and I do have a six-pack and veins and lines in my butt, so I don't really need to say 90 kilos. I'm fairly lean as it is. So let's calculate my BMR based on that. My BMR is that. So 2,000 calories, I can survive on 2,000 calories, and that's pretty much what I do right now. So I'm not really growing any muscle because I'm consuming just a little bit over my BMR. That's my BMR for me, for my age. Now, I train, 4 or 5 times a week, so I'll times it by the same amount I had before, and this is to maintain my weight is 2,928. So it's around 3,000 calories. 3,000 calories, let's make it nice, 3,000. 3,000 is to maintain what I'm doing. Okay, that was 1,889. So 3,000 calories. If I wanted to lose weight, if I wanted to get leaner, I have to eat under this. So I could cut it back to 2.5, and I could start to lose weight, and I'd pretty much be in fairly lean shape very, very quickly. 3,000, the problem is I'm not eating this as it is. That's why I'm so lean. If I was to eat this, I would be aiming to bulk up, and if I really, really wanted to bulk up, I'd have to eat well in excess of not just 500 more, but you're talking maybe trying to eat 4,000 calories. But at someone my age, if you're trying to get to 4,000, 5,000, it's really hard. If you ever sit down and you try to break it out into meals, to get 4,000 calories is a lot of work. I just don't have the time to eat that. So even eating 3,000, it's quite hard. But okay, let's work this out. So I should be on 3,000 calories. And we'll stick to, we'll actually use the bodybuilding macros suggested in the book, the ISSN recommended. And that macros, if you remember, I've lost my notes. I believe. They're just falling down into the book. Here we go. Right, was the one more. Macro requirements for endurance. Here we go. All right. So as a bodybuilder, we had 45, 30, and 25. So 45% of 3,000. So we have 3,000 times 0.45. 3,000 times 0.45. That is 1,350 calories coming from carbs. Then we have 3,000 times 0.3. That's 900 calories coming from protein. 3,000 times 0.25. That's 750 coming from fat. So we've got 1,350 calories coming from carbs. 1,350 divided by 4. That is 337.5 grams of carbs. 900 divided by 4. That's 225 grams of protein. Then we have 750 divided by 9. That's 83 grams of fat. So 337 grams of carbs, 225 of protein, and 83 grams of fat. That would be my breakdown if I wanted to build the muscle that I want to be on the caloric requirement that it's suggesting for me. Now 225, if I consider that, remember I'm 100 kilos times 1.8 is 180 grams of protein. If I based it on the protein requirement of Olympia Toppin, and they're timesing it by 0.8, the high end, 225 is actually more protein than this. It's quite a lot more. Is it harmful to have that protein? No. Can I use it as energy? Yes. Would I be better off served having those calories here in carbohydrates? Yes. I would be better off having carbs. There's only so much protein you need to grow muscle. So in anything in addition to that, in my mind, it's not necessary. But if we did do the extreme, which would be 2 grams, that makes me 200. So 200 grams of protein is still not 225. So that's why I had this one at 50, because I really think you should be having a bit more carbs. The book says 45 for bodybuilding, but if you think about it, if you're doing it like a split, maybe training even when I lived in China, I used to train twice a day. I had a morning workout, then an afternoon workout, and my calories were high, and I was consuming a lot of carbs. Now, this is how I would break down a diet for somebody who was competing. But if we're looking at these fats here, I would drop that to 20 and keep that I would have that 50, 30, 20. You could have 40, 40, 20, but the person's going to have such an expensive diet because it costs way more for chicken breast than rice. So realistically, you don't need to have that much protein. 1.4 to 1.8, that actually gives me 180 grams. Now, if you're having 6 meals a day, then you break 180 divided by 6. But realistically, how much protein can the body digest or absorb? They say about 1.8 to 1.2, so 0.8 grams to 12 grams of protein per hour, the average absorption through the small intestine. So if you're consuming meals of 60 grams of protein, yes, you could absorb that if that meal takes many hours to pass through the digestive tract. But if you're drinking a 660 gram protein shake in its liquid form, by the 2-hour mark, it's gone through the small intestine. You've got no more time to absorb it. So if you're consuming 40 grams of, like, say for example, I'm getting a Body Lab Whey 100. Okay, it's whey protein concentrate. Whey protein concentrate has a 1.5 to 2 hour protein digestive time. So in the first hour, you're not really absorbing much protein because it still has to break down. So I take 40 grams of protein whey protein concentrate form. In the first hour, I'm getting very little protein. The second hour, I'm getting maybe that 12 grams. What about the other? Because after the 2-hour mark, I don't have any more time to absorb. If we add oats to it, or we slow it, the travel through by adding it to our food, we can make that protein take longer to pass the tract. But if you're drinking everything in shake form, and it's a very liquid, runny, like an Optimum Gold Standard is super watery, super runny, that's going to pass straight through. That's why Optimum is mostly, it's 55% isolate. It's got isolate, concentrate, and hydrolyzed isolate. So that actually works They have to work with that. But if you're consuming all of your meals as whey protein concentrate and you're having massive shakes, you're not really absorbing all that protein. So you're much better off consuming it in real food, letting it take its time to the parts of the digestive tract. But here, 180. Now, I'm not a big person. I'm not a bodybuilder anymore. So, 180 is because I only weigh 100 kilos. A proper IFU Pro is 120, 130. So there you can imagine their protein requirement is much higher because they are another 20, 30 kilos heavier than me. But your average person weighs around 80, 90 kilos as a athlete trying to build muscle. That's quite most of my customers are around 85, 90 kilos. So their protein requirement is not even 180. So writing a diet, when you first got to work out you got to get all the details about their height, their age, and then you got to work out what's their lean mass, how much they weigh. Then you do their BMR, the activity factor. We end up with these numbers here. Like 2,500. That's realistically a good number for me. If it was based on 2,500 rather than 3,000, what would my protein requirements be there? 2,500 and then times 0.3. That's now 750. 750 divided by 4. Oh, look at that. 187, which is pretty much puts me exactly where I want to be. 2,500 is a realistic amount of calories for me, considering the amount of time I have running 2 shops, being a single dad, all that stuff. So this 1.8, the maths there was beautiful. I love it when it works out like that. So 2,500 is kind of what I should be shooting for. But, the average client is under 2,000. It's around about 1,800, 1,700 calories. So if you're writing a diet for somebody, you've got to take all those things into account. And we haven't even discussed the protein sources, the carb sources. We can do that in another video. But I wanted to discuss the macro breakdown and how we can structure the diet like this, and what the difference is between this and a keto diet. And look, we could go on forever here, but I'm really passionate about this. This was science-based, and I will still have some broccoli-headed pimple kids who will attack me for the stuff I had, saying my science is old science. But, the most, I would say Paul Chek, Charles Poliquin, these were people that were really respected and admired in the industry. And these people had an idea that they were hell-bent on was 100% correct. And then 10 years down the track, they go, oh, I was wrong. And they say, yeah, they open and say, oh, look, I was wrong. I should have done that. I mean, I didn't know all the things at the time, and they changed their belief. If you're a 20-year-old and you think you know everything, you will have a rude awakening, because when Charles Poliquin, at his ripe old age, could come out and say, wow, I was really wrong there, and he coached Olympic athletes, he worked with Milosh, he was one of the true gurus of the fitness industry. He, hand his heart, say, look, I was wrong. These 20-year-old people, when they come with this conviction and they say, if your trainer is still making you do this, you should fire them. You go, listen, no one listens to you. You've got a small following of people. No, small following, who knows? It could be real, could be bots. But, okay, a bunch of other 16-year-olds, all C-Bum fans. These all follow him, believe him. But how much real-world experience do you have? You can believe on the science. This is where we start. We start here, and then we adjust. So, for example, I do their skin folds, and I see their body fat percentage is not changing. What do I have to adjust? I can adjust these macros. That's what we do. When we write a diet, we start. We don't have to stick to this. We adjust it to see how can we get that body fat percentage down. And we measure that. We get their skin folds done. This is how I do it, because I don't have a flotation tank. I don't have a DEXA scan. So I measure their skin folds, and I see If their skin folds, if their millimeters are going down and their weight's going up, poof, I know they're putting on muscle. So if the goal is to lose fat, we keep a track on this and we measure it every week, every couple of weeks, so they're not spending 1 month going in the wrong direction. We reel it in, we fix it. This is how we start it, and then you need somebody who's open-minded and can work with you and get you to the next point. But the last person you should be taking your advice from is someone that has never stood on stage or helped someone get. The thing is, you may not respect bodybuilders, but we can look a very specific way, like by 1 o'clock on a Sunday in 4 months' time. That's how exact we are. We can get someone to look a specific way to the hour, to the minute. That means we have to take all this into account, adjust, tweak, fine tune. These broccoli head kids, they have endless time. They don't have all of these ways in which to all these tools. We have them. The thing with us older guys is that we've got a million ways to skin a cat. And that's what you have to realize. Every different method can work at different points. What works this year somehow doesn't work next year, but can work again in 3 years' time. Who knows? But I'll be the first to say I don't know everything. I'll be the first to say, hey, I know very little. But I will also say with confidence that I can get you from A to B safely and get those results because I've done it time and time again. I'm not trying to sell PT here. I'm not trying to sell any comp prep. I'm just basically saying that if you follow these kinds of methods, this is science-based with enough practical anecdotal experience to make sure it does work. So I hope you enjoyed today's session. I hope you enjoyed talking about macros. I apologize if I appeared at random and disjointed. It's because I am very, very passionate about this, and also I have so much information to give. I have struggled to keep it linear. That's why I spent the first few sessions talking about just ATP, just creatine, or just anaerobic, or just Krebs cycle, because I knew if I was to discuss all of that stuff, your head would explode. But this is what we talked about today. I would like to talk more about training in another session. We could go more into macro breakdown more specifically. Another one, we could do this again for maybe a woman, and we can type in the stats, or we can do it for someone. Even if you make a comment and say, look, how about you do me as a case study, and we can do it. But I would love to share more information with you in the up and coming sessions. But yeah, I need some help in what to do. But hope you enjoyed today's session.